we have to move forward towards things because we have requirements. There are things that we require to keep us alive and to keep us wanting to be alive as well. And those are different things. And we move forward towards things that we value. So there's two propositions there. The first is that we have to move forward because there are things to move forward to, because there are things we need and want. And the second is that to move forward towards something is simultaneously to value it. And so one of the implications of that is that we always live in a framework of value. There's no escaping that, and that we're moved forward. I detailed this out quite substantially in my book, Maps of Meaning, but we're always at a place, and we're always moving towards a place that in principle has some advantage over the place we're at. Otherwise, why move towards it? And so what that means is that there's no life without value. At least there's no human life without value. Out of necessity, and also not only out of necessity at the physiological level, but also out of necessity at the psychological level, because another thing that you might point out, that I think is usefully pointed out, is that not only do you have to move from point A to B in life, but point A is often a very difficult place to be, because we're fragile and bounded and mortal and limited, and because we know that. And so one of the implications of that, as many great religious traditions are at pains to illustrate or demonstrate or proclaim, is that life is essentially suffering. And I believe that to be a fundamental truth. But perhaps not the most fundamental truth, because I think the most fundamental truth is that despite the fact that life is suffering, people can transcend that. And partly the way they transcend that is by pursuing things of value. And so that if there is no value proposition at hand, then you have no meaning to justify the difficult conditions of your life. And that's brutally difficult for people. You know, Nietzsche said, he who has a why can bear any how. And you see, and I've certainly seen this as a clinical practitioner, that people who have no purpose in their life are embittered by the difficulties of their life. And they become first bitter, and then resentful, and then revengeful, and then cruel. And there's plenty of places to go past cruel. That's just where you start if you're really on a downhill path. All right, so those are the first propositions. The second proposition would be, well, if you're going to pursue something of value, because you're a social creature, you're going to pursue that thing of value in a social space, and that means you're going to compete and cooperate with people around you in the pursuit of that value. And what that inevitably means is that, given that the pursuit of anything valuable is going to be a collective enterprise, that you're going to produce a hierarchy, or maybe more than one hierarchy, but at least a hierarchy of competence in relationship to that pursuit. So it doesn't matter what you decide to pursue, maybe you're going to do that cooperatively, you're going to find that you and other people vary in your ability to manage that pursuit effectively and efficiently. And so there's going to be a hierarchy of people, from those who are very good at the pursuit. Maybe it's pole vaulting, maybe it's delivering massages, maybe it's delivering groceries, maybe it's setting up an enterprise. It doesn't matter. But if it's a valuable pursuit and you pursue it socially, you're going to produce a hierarchy. And the hierarchy is going to be one of competence. And so if you're going to pursue value, then you're going to construct a hierarchy. And then there's an implication from that, which is that if you construct a hierarchy, most of the people within that hierarchical structure are a minority of people who are going to be fantastically successful at the pursuit, and a very large number are going to stack up at the bottom. And that's a manifestation of what's known as Price's law. It's mapped by the Pareto distribution. It's an expression of what's been known among economists as the Matthew principle from the New Testament. To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken away. And it's an iron law of the distribution of success in hierarchies. Abraham is self-conscious, that's what this commentary says, but the thing is he moves forward despite that. He's self-conscious and he knows the danger, but he moves forward despite that. And that's actually the appropriate response in the face of actual non-naive understanding of what constitutes life. Like if you're naive and you move forward, it's like, well, what the hell do you know? You know, there's no courage in naivety because you don't know what there is to stop you. You don't know what dangers you might apprehend. But to be aware of what it is that your problem is, so to be alert existentially, let's say, or to be fully self-conscious means that you're perfectly aware of your limitations and how you might be hurt. And then to make the decision to move forward into the unknown and the land of the stranger. Anyways, that's the I would say that's one of the secrets to a good life. And I can say that really without fear of contradiction, I would say, because the clinical literature on this is very, very, very clear. What you do with people who are afraid, and to some degree depressed, but certainly anxious, is you lay out what they're anxious about, first of all, in detail. What is it that you're afraid of? What might happen? And then you decompose it into small problems, hypothetically manageable problems, and then you have the person expose themselves to the thing that they're afraid of, and what happens isn't that they get less afraid. That isn't what the clinical literature indicates exactly. What happens instead is they get braver. And that's not the same thing, right? Because if you get less afraid, it's like, well, the world isn't as dangerous as I thought it was, you know, silly me. If you get braver, that's not what happens. What happens is, yeah, the damn world's just as dangerous as I thought, or maybe it's even more dangerous than I thought, but it turns out that there's something in me that responds to taking that on as a voluntary challenge and grows and thrives as a consequence. And there's no doubt about this. Even the psychophysiological findings are quite clear. If you impose a stressor on two groups of people, and on one group the stressor is imposed involuntarily, and on the other group the stressor is picked up voluntarily, the people who pick up the stressor voluntarily use a whole different psychophysiological system to deal with it. They use the system that's associated with approach and challenge, and not the system that's associated with defensive aggression and withdrawal. And the system that is associated with challenge is much more associated with positive emotion and much less associated with negative emotion. It's also much less hard on you, because the defensive posturing system, the prey animal system, man, when that thing kicks in, it's all systems are go for you, you know. The gas is pushed down to the pedals pushed down to the metal, and the brakes are on. You're using future resources that you could be storing for future time right now in the present to ready yourself for emergency. So there's nothing simple or trivial at all about the idea of being called to move forthrightly forward into the strange and the unknown. And there's a real adventure that's associated with that, right? So that's an exciting thing, which is part of the reason why people travel. And then also to see yourself as the sort of creature that can do that, is willing to do that on a habitual basis, is also the right kind of tonic for, I hate this word, for your self-esteem. You know, because the self-esteem has nothing to do with feeling good about yourself. As I already mentioned, there isn't necessarily a reason why a priori you should just feel good about yourself. But if you can view yourself acting in a courageous and forthright manner, and encountering the world and trying to improve your lot, and taking risks, you know, in a non-naive way, well, then you have something that you can comfort yourself with at night when you're wondering what the whole damn point of your futile and miserable life. And that's necessary, because it's often the case that you wake up at 4 in the morning, or at least sometimes the case that you wake up at 4 in the morning when things haven't been going that well, and wonder just what the hell the point is of your futile and miserable life. You have to have something real to set against that. It can't be just rationalizations about how, you know, you're a valuable person among others, even though that's true. That's not good enough. You need something that's more realistic to set against that. And observing courage in yourself is definitely one of the things that can help you sleep soundly at night when things are destabilized a little bit around you. So Zazu, the eyes of the king, comes to check out the king, and that's, what's his name? What's the king's name? Mufasa, yeah, and he's a very regal-looking person, lion, and he stands up straight and tall, and that means that he's high in serotonin, because serotonin governs postural flexion, and if you're dominant and near the top of hierarchies, you tend to expand so that you look bigger than you could if you shrunk down. And so if you're a low dominant person, you wander around like this so that you look small and weak, and you don't pose a threat to anybody. But if you're at the top, you expand yourself so that you can command the space, and that's why he has that particular kind of regal posture. And if you look at his facial expression, you see that it's quite severe. Like he's capable of kindness, but he's also harsh and judgmental. And that's what society is like. That's what the superego is like. And what that means is that he's integrated his aggression. And I've seen this happen in my clinical clients when they come in and they're too agreeable. They look like Simba looks later in the movie when he's an adolescent, and he's sort of like a deer in the headlights. Everything is coming in and nothing is coming out. But when the person integrates their shadow and gets the aggressive part of themselves integrated into their personality, their faces harden. And if you look at people, you can tell
because the people who are too agreeable look childlike and innocent, and the people who, well, a hyper-aggressive person will look, mean and cruel. But I've seen people's face change in the course of therapy, men and women. And what happens is they start to look more mature, and it's more like they're judging the world as well as interacting with it properly once they integrate that more disagreeable part of them. It's very, very necessary, and that's part of the incorporation of the Jungian shadow, or the incorporation of the unconscious from a Freudian perspective. But old Musafa there, he's already got that covered.